Hey guys, welcome. Today is Friday, and so it is story time. Generally on a Friday, we kind of do a story time, which is lessons learned from real estate, something funny, something sad, something terrible, or there in between that happened. And so the whole point of story time is what are the lessons learned, and then what do you do basically because of this particular incident that happened. So today we're going to talk about changing market, and as the market changes, what are some of the opportunities that come up, right? And this is about a real estate investor that used to be. So as some of you guys know, I at one point was a real estate agent from the age of about 19 till 32, right? I was selling real estate actively, and then I still had my license until last year. And last year, I sent the license back to the state, basically that I don't need a real estate license anymore, so I sent it back. But all this time, I've had a real estate license, and when I was selling real estate, this is during 2000. I moved to Chicago 2002, so 2002 through 2008. 2008 is when I actually started investing in real estate, and I had built my business on basically doing cold calls. Really, that's what I did every day. I called expired listings, canceled listings, and listings that were for sale by owners. So that's how I built my business. Every day, I would do 500 dials at the time on two phones. You didn't have a computer system where you could just hit one and boom, it would do that. But so I would have to manually do on two phones. So that's how I had built up my business. And a lot of times in 2002, if you remember, so this is obviously after 9/11, 2002, the market was, people were kind of, like, oh my God, something crazy like this happens in September. And I remember I moved to Chicago sometime around March, April, sometime around that time. So finally, the market had kind of stabilized again. And I need to have this here. Sorry. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. Anyways, so what I was saying was, I don't think I had my mic in the right place. So let me just repeat that on Fridays, we generally do a story time. And the whole point of the story time is that either it's a real estate story, life lesson learned, and then what is the lesson learned from that, right? So today we're going to kind of talk about the changing market, because today the market is changing in a lot of different places. Some people think it's good, some people think it's bad, so it just depends. But I want to relate this. So this is basically an investor that I knew, and he had bought properties from 2002 all the way through 2008. And in 2008, when the market started shifting, he was very worried. So this guy used to work at Motorola, and an engineer there in Palatine, and he had bought about 11 units at the time. And these were all small condos in condo buildings that were 6-unit buildings in Palatine. And I was the agent that had sold him these properties. And his kind of thought process was, well, I'm going to buy some of these 10 or 12 of these condos over time. They're going to get paid down. And then I'm going to have some cash flow, and I'm going to have paid off properties. So that's going to be another part of my retirement, which was fine. But then whenever he would buy the properties, a lot of times he was paying basically numbers where they were not really cash flowing that much, right? He wasn't losing a lot of money every month, but between the 11 properties, he was losing about $1,000. So let's just say about $80, $90 per property he was losing. But his logic was, well, I'm basically paying down the properties, and he had been paying down the properties over a period of time. And I had sold him the property. So when the market started changing in 2008, 9, 10, kind of around that era, he got really, really concerned. He said, man, I'm going to have a hard time. Maybe I'm going to lose my properties. I'm like, well, has the cash flow changed on it? He's like, well, not really, right? But here's kind of what is important to understand. So what was happening is this. So you have a 6-unit building, right? And there's a bunch of these up in Palatine. And in each of those buildings, what was happening was this, that let's say the top unit it goes into foreclosure. So when that becomes an REO property at the time, bank-owned property, that unit would be selling for somewhere around $50,000. right? Um, and then yet the properties that were regular sales, they were selling for 120, 130. So you'd wonder why. Why wouldn't somebody buy a bank-owned property but pay a market price at that time? The market price. Now the market price had been 160 and it come dwindled down to 130, 120. And I kept telling him, sell it, sell it, sell it. He's like, and he couldn't understand what I was saying. So what I was saying to him was this: sell your property to a regular FHA buyer, even if you have to reduce the price a little bit and give them a deal. Go ahead and do that, right? And then buy the properties that are foreclosures. He's like, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, no, right now your properties are not cash flowing. As soon as you buy the foreclosure properties and fix them, because they only need $15,000, $20,000 to fix, you can buy them. But FHA people who are buying these properties 3.5% down, they don't have the money, even though it's 15 or 20,000 bucks. They don't have the money to be able to buy those. And I'm like, listen, man, you're going to sell this one for 130. And in the same building, you can buy a property for 45, 50,000 bucks because the FHA people are not buying those. And the market was soft. So then there was a lack of buyers in the market, right? And it took me about a year to convince him of this. So here's what happened, right? He sells about 11 of his properties. So the entire inventory he turned over. And in that process, on paper, right, he ended up losing close to $20,000 when he sold all of those. I was the agent on that end. But my point to him was, hey, man, I'll find you properties that are at 45 and 50. In the same complex, you can own 2 times the amount of properties. You can actually own close to 22 properties. He ended up owning 24 of those. And because the interest rates were low, and because basically they were trying to get people to buy properties, and because you could, tenant demand was high. People would lose houses and then they would become tenants. Their debt was wiped out, so now they could pay again, right? And I'm like, man, listen, your cash flow is going to actually go up. And I'll never forget, he got to property number 15 because till then he's like, Andrew, you've talked me into this. And his wife was upset. His wife was terribly upset with me because she was like, number one, she didn't believe in real estate to begin with. Number two, her husband every month was losing about $80 per month, right? And then here I am telling him to sell all the properties, take a loss for 20,000, and then double down and buy. I'm like, listen, man, you're selling these properties 125, 130, right? You're buying properties for 45, 50. You cannot lose because guess what? Your cash flow now, because he'd be in the deal. He buys a property for 47. I'll never forget this one property. He bought 47,000 bucks. He put literally about $14,000 in the property. So purchase plus rehab, he's in the deal for about 61. Appraisal comes back 120. I'm like, refinance that, right? He refinances it and boom, his cash flow goes through the roof. Now suddenly on every property, he's making $450, $500 per property. Right? And I'll never forget this. He got to 11 properties, same number, and his wife finally sat down and did the numbers. And that day is the first day. She's like, Andrew, we're going to take you out to dinner, right? And I had known this couple for a while, and she unloads on me over dinner all this thing that she's like, I never believed it. I thought you were scamming my husband, and every time you would make a commission, and I never liked it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she couldn't stand, I didn't know this because she would never engage with me, and her husband was the one I would deal with. Literally over a period of about 2.5, 3 years, as I started buying rental properties, they were doing this where they recycled their whole property. The reason why I want to relate this particular experience to you guys, that whenever a market is changing, what happens is there are wide opportunities that open up in a market, like there are opening up today, right? It's the same thing, just a little bit different format. And it's not always the same. The market will present itself in different formats. The question becomes is this: not whether you can make money. The question always is, do you know how? Can you understand how the market is changing? And then how do you make money? I mean, it's like, think about it. If you've seen the movie Big Short, right? What happened in that movie, right? The guy could see that a collapse was imminent. He shorted the stocks, and because he shorted the stocks, he made money, and everybody lost money. In real estate, what happens? Like today, if you look at it, in all the A areas and B areas, you have prices that are higher than ever. You have C areas and D areas where property prices are coming down, right? So you have in one area, like what is Chicago? Chicago and the Metroplex area is not just one city. With people who don't understand real estate, they're like, well, where do you live? Well, I live in suburbs of Chicago. So because you live in suburbs of Chicago, you realize, like, if you live in Naperville, or you live in Northbrook, or you live in, say, Tinley Park, Northbrook, and Naperville, they have nothing to do with what's going on in Dalton. That has nothing to do with what's going on in Auburn Gresham. That has nothing to do with. So what you have to think about whenever you live in a big city and around, you're basically a bunch of cities put together. That's what a Chicagoland area is. And this is not what happened in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? In 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, what happened was everybody took a hit, but the poorer areas took a bigger hit relative to some of the areas. But I mean, think about, I want to give you guys an example, and I want to put some real numbers. So at the time, I'm a real estate agent in Roselle. That's where the office used to be, RE/MAX office, where I was. And now when I looked around at that time, I'm like, man, Schaumburg is a nice area. I would love to be able to do flips in Schaumburg, but I couldn't afford it. Right? I didn't have enough money to be able to buy properties. I mean, at that time, can you imagine the amount of deals I would have gotten? But I just didn't have the money, right, to be able to do that. So then I had to go to Hoffman Estates, the old part of Hoffman Estates. I had to go to Streamwood, Hanover Park, and at that time, so in 2005, I was selling a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch, in good condition for about $220 at that time, right? Now the mortgage crisis is coming. Nobody's paying attention. Prices are higher than ever. And every day I was realizing that a mortgage crisis is coming. The only reason I was realizing is this: the number of for sale by owners was going up. The number of expired listings, right? Listings that went to the market, did not sell. Each day was a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger pile. The amount of properties that were being canceled was a bigger and bigger and bigger pile. What does that mean? What that means is that a lot of property is going on the market. It's not selling, right? Clearly, it's overpriced. And people are getting frustrated. And this pile is building up while the news media keeps saying, no, there's nothing wrong with the market. There's nothing wrong with the market. There's nothing wrong with the market, right? See, the news media reports yesterday's news. And so what was happening was they kept reporting news that was old, right? And they didn't tell anybody what was happening because they report the superficial stuff. In the back end, there's bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger inventories growing. There's more and more people missing their mortgage payments. More and more properties are going to foreclosure. And because more and more properties are going to foreclosure, what started happening was obviously the amount of pool of buyers went down and there's more properties available, hence the prices started coming down. Today, what is happening is, if you look at an A area and B area, what's happening is the amount of demand is very strong, even with high interest rates. The amount of supply is small, and it's small for 2 reasons. Like, number one, the biggest reason is that people are like, hey, even if I want to buy a bigger house, I don't want to basically give up my 3.2, 3.4, 3.5% lock on interest rates, right? Because even if I sell a house, think about it. If I sell a house for $400,000 and I buy another house for $400,000, guess what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is my interest rates, even if my mortgage amount remains the same, but my payments on that amount are going to be 40 to 45, 50% higher. And so guess what? Most people are like, hey, if I don't have to sell, I'm not going to sell, right? I'm just going to stay in the same property. And this is what people are doing. Or they'll say, I'll just rent it out, right? I'm going to move to Florida. I'm not going to sell, man. I'm just going to rent out my house. And guess what? I have low payments that are locked in. Boom. Now, what does that do? What that does is that artificially shrinks the supply that is available for people. And hence the prices go up. See, in areas that are A areas and B areas today, right now what's going on is people buy a home in an A and B areas. They buy a school district. They buy a location. In a C and a D area, C areas are areas that have some challenges. D areas are that have lots of challenges. That's a D area, right? In those areas, people buy a payment because their ability to buy a home is limited by the payment on the house. So if they're buying, let's say, a $200,000 house, the payment on that house would have been $1,600. Now today, it's going to be $2,200 because the interest rates are that much higher, right? What's going to happen for those people is they're like, oh my God, I want to buy a house, but I just can't afford it because my income is not going to qualify. So what is happening in those areas is the pricing is coming down, and in the nice areas, B and A areas, the pricing is going up. So now people are like, well, how does that benefit me? Because that's why, if you're listening to this, that's what you should be thinking about. How does this benefit me? What can I do about it? So if I take the Chicagoland area, what do I know about it? Like, so if I look at the area, where is the places that I can find distress? The one place I know off the bat that I can find distress is places that are not on the MLS. Because on the MLS, if it's a good property, you're going to have a much more likelihood of a lot of multiple offers on property, and the prices go up, right? And that's been going on for a long time. But what about the auction? Well, if I go to the sheriff's sale, again, I'm going to have a problem because if the property comes up at a good price, there's going to be a lot of competition. The one place where you don't have a lot of competition and yet you have the most amount of properties available today, right? This is called understanding the pivot, meaning that when the market turns, you can be one of those guys that just keeps overpaying for properties, and then when the market turns, now you get your butt handed to you. Or you understand, how do I take advantage of as the market turns? As the market turns, if you understand how to take advantage of it, you're always going to win, right? Because it has nothing to do with interest rates. Interest rates today are 7.8 as a commercial loan. A couple of years ago, they were at 5%. Before that, you could get a loan for about 4.8, right, during Corona. And so the question was not whether you could work the market. Today, I'm still buying properties more than ever, right? But guess what? My cash flow hasn't changed. My the Airbnb income I'm making, that hasn't changed. Interest rates is a little bit higher, but as long as the property will make money, I will keep buying. If the interest rates are up, I'll keep buying. If the interest rates are low, I'll keep buying. The only thing that'll happen is if the interest rates climb up to a certain amount, then the sellers are going to be more and more people are going to lose their properties. The more people I lose the properties, the more properties I'm going to buy. So regardless, if the market is great, I win because I own a lot of properties. If the market is bad, I win because I get to buy a lot more properties, right? So as an investor, there is no way for you to lose if you understand how to take advantage of the market. That's the biggest thing, right? If you're like everybody else and you're competing based on price, meaning you're just going to have to pay higher and higher amounts, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be in deep doo-doo land, right? So what do we do today? So today, if you look at it, in the Chicagoland area, we're dealing with an inventory of somewhere around 26,000 properties that are pre-foreclosures. So guess what we're doing today? We're going after the people that are in pre-foreclosure. What are we doing? What else are we doing? We're going after the people before the properties end up at auction. That's where we're going. So if you're listening to this and you're not going after those properties, guys, you're making a mistake. Why? Because if those properties go to auction and they're reasonable price, they're going to get bid up, right? And the person who pays the highest amount, right, is the greater fool is going to win. Or if they get listed on the market, then guess what's going to happen? If it's listed at a decent price, the price is going to get jacked up. Why? Because there's so much demand. The one place you can win still today in today's market is going to be properties that are about to go to auction and that are properties that are in pre-foreclosure. There's close to about 26,000 of these properties. So you can't say, Andrew, I can't find deals, right? And I'll give you guys an example. So around the office, I picked a few suburbs that I like, right? The office is located in Lombard. We're a block from Oak Brook. I live in Oak Brook. So these are areas that are expensive areas, obviously. It's going to be hard for me to find too many properties. A handful you will, but too many properties that are foreclosure in Oak Brook. In Lombard, the choice is going to be less. But if I look at Hillside, if I look at Bellwood, if I look at Westchester, if I look at like surrounding areas like Broadview. So in those areas, I found about 196 properties, right, that were basically pre-foreclosures. Of the 196 properties, I did a mailing to them. Then I did a second one, third one. While the mailing is going on, I had a virtual assistant company call all the people and say, hey, did you get our mail? We've been trying to get hold of you. Did you know your property is in foreclosure? And a lot of people, oh, I have no idea, blah, blah, blah. They know. They've gotten numerous calls. They've gotten numerous stuff in the mail from attorneys, from the banks, from a bunch of people. But guess what happens when we're in trouble? We want to put our head in the sand and just wait. Because if we wait long enough and we close our eyes, the trouble is going to go away. We've all done that with different parts of our lives, right? We've all done that. Certainly, I'm guilty of that at times, where I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know about it. Just because I can close my eyes and put my head in the sand, it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's just going to get worse until you lose the property, right? Yet, of 196 people, right, we have sent them out 5 or 6 postcards. On top of that, in terms of calls, on an average, we've made 8 to 9 calls to every single person on that list. On top of that, whoever's phone number we could trace, we have sent them. We've not only called them, but on top of that, we've sent them text messages, right? And some of them, we've basically sent people to go knock on the doors. And of the 196, guess what happened? There are 4 properties that so far I've found of 196. That's it. But guys, those 4 properties, right? 4 properties. One of them, I'm going to do a wholesale because the price that I'm getting it for is not the best price, and somebody is willing to offer me a stupidly good sale. So this is a property in Hillside. I would love to keep it, but the numbers, according to me, are not quite as good as I would want them, because the buy price that I'm buying that property for is $159,000. And there's an investor that thinks he can do a flip over there and he can flip the property for $350,000. So he's buying the property from me for $211,000. I just don't think those numbers work. He's giving me a quick profit, right? And this is, mind you, a property that I found as a short sale, right? And I'm doing basically a double close on that property. That's property number 1. The rest of the 3 properties, all of them, I'm buying them under $136,000. The highest one is $136,000, right? 3 of them. And every single one of them is in Westchester, one of them is in Berkeley, and another one of them is in Broadview. 136 is the highest price that I'm paying for those properties. Every single one of them is going to appraise out so the one in Westchester is going to appraise out at about 360. The second one, that is Berkeley, is going to be somewhere around 330. And the one in Broadview is probably going to appraise out somewhere around 280. What I'm trying to say is this, that because the market is changing, what it's doing is it's providing an opportunity for me. Why? Because the number of pre-foreclosures has ticked up. And the banks are very willing to make a deal with you today, right? Because they don't want, in Illinois, they don't want to go through the foreclosure process, not because they're not capable of it. The reason they don't want to go through it is because the time period is anywhere from 18 months to 5 years. It's one of the longest states where it takes the most amount of time to foreclose on a property. So a lot of times these banks are willing to say, hey, listen, I'll make a deal with you. So what I was saying was this. Back in 2008, 9, and 10, the lesson I had learned was that you could sell a property at retail and buy a property in the same building at wholesale, meaning buy it from a bank, and the retail property you're selling for $120,000, $130,000 because that's being bought by a FHA buyer. The property you're buying from an REO, because a normal buyer couldn't buy that property because it needed $10,000, $15,000 in a condo, basically one of those 6-unit buildings, 3 on each side, right? And these are 2-bedroom, 1-bath condos. So over there, what I learned was that as long as you stay a step ahead. You can always keep winning, right? That guy went from 11 properties to 22 properties, sold his properties, readjusted the portfolio, and literally on 22 properties, he ended up with cash about $460 or so per per unit, every single unit, and he had a bunch of equity. Why? Because his all-in cost was really good. What do we learn today? Today, what we're learning is this: that just because the market is ridiculous, it's higher than it has ever been, that doesn't mean there's not an opportunity. There is an adjustment going on. People who had basically any sort of a balloon coming up, people who had any issues coming up, right? Because the market is adjusting, people are still losing jobs, right? Believe it or not. So what is happening is, and yet in other sectors, they can't get, like if you look in the aviation sector, right? There's a huge shortage of pilots. They're paying pilots 50, 60, 70,000 bonuses just to sign on. This wasn't the case. Obviously, during Corona, all the pilots were off. A lot of them got furloughed, right? This is just a changing market. In other industries, things are changing. But yet, it is opening up an opportunity that is in the pre-foreclosure space. All these years, last 2, 3 years, you couldn't even do pre-foreclosures. Why? Because people didn't have to. People had basically, they could basically delay their payments. They could do a readjustment on it. They could do so many deals with the banks. But guess what? All those properties that were stuck during Corona, now they're starting to come through. All the newer ones that were basically went into pre-foreclosure, which is a normal process. But Chicagoland is the #1 place in the country that has the most amount of FHA properties and that has the most amount of foreclosures. Now, a lot of people will be like, oh my God, isn't that bad? It's actually not bad. It's actually really good for you and I because we can get a lot of deals. Just Cook County alone has more foreclosures than the entire state of Florida, than the entire state of Texas. Think about the numbers, right? That the numbers here are so high that it can be incredibly, incredibly profitable for you. The question is, do you know how to work it? So what next? Well, if you are somebody that would like to get that list, make sure you reach out to us. Say, hey, Andrew talked about the hot list, right? I want to get the hot list of these pre-foreclosure properties, and we will send you a nice big sampling. I can't send you all of them. There's 25,000 properties, so just please, right? But we will definitely send you a lot of properties, and we'll show you the exact next step to take, the exact things that I'm doing, which is how do you reach out with a postcard? How do you reach out with phone calls? And how do you reach out if you go to the door? What do you say? And to be able to get those properties in today's market. So hopefully the story I was telling you made some sense. Hopefully that makes sense as to how you can use some of these things that we talk about in your practical day-to-day investing. This is Andrew Holmes. Please help us grow. Refer your friends, refer your family, other people that would like to know about how to invest in real estate. So we would love to share this information with our entire community. Having said that, thanks so much, and we will talk to you on Monday.